Let's see.
Like,
Can you maybe mute folks,
How
Molly?
do people know how to grow in the organization? Because
there's no awareness of, well, and especially then we go into a couple of red budget years where it's like, no one's getting.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to be talking about our online repository of fossils as a resource. So I am one of the 2 collection managers here at the Museum of Paleontology. My specialty is in invertebrates, particularly Paleozoic invertebrates. And my colleague, Adam Roundtree, is in charge of our vertebrates and paleobotany. So he built out this website that was largely started to essentially share our fossils with researchers when we were unable to mail them for whatever reason. Maybe they were fragile or too rare or something came up. So the kind of structure of the website is not perfect for non-scientists to navigate, but we've been working on different resources and trying to figure out different ways that it might be used both in formal education and informal education. So I was just gonna give a little tour and then kind of talk about the resources that we have on there right now, and I'd be happy to take user feedback or suggestions on how we could make things a little bit more user-friendly. So this is our landing page. I can go ahead and throw the link in the chat. So if you want to follow along on there, you can, but it's pretty straightforward. We have an about page, which does include how we actually do the methods. So we think a lot about methods development and making photogrammetry, which is how we make our 3D models more accessible. There's also various things like terms of use, other credits, and things like that. And then we kind of just have separation by major organism group. So as I am biased towards invertebrates, I'm going to start on that side. So you could kind of hover over the drop down, and then there are more kind of pages that you can navigate to. But again, like, you need to know the major animal groups, otherwise this won't really make sense if you're just kind of poking around. So if we click on phylum Arthropoda, this includes things like insects, trilobites, sea scorpions, regular scorpions, anything with that kind of hard carapace, so also cicadas, insects, things like that. We have a lot of trilobites on the website. That's a kind of a fan favorite for a lot of collectors. And it displays them kind of in a tiled format. And say I'm really interested in this flexi, I can click on it, and it kind of takes you to essentially like a profile of the specimen that includes information essentially extracted from our database and specimen records. So you have some information on the side. In some instances, the models are downloadable, and it would say underneath the trilobite, click here to download. But you do need to have kind of a login, but it's free. So you can just sign in. That helps us track usage. So if I clicked on the trilobite, it will pop up the actual viewer where I can manipulate the specimen in 3 dimensions. So this is kind of the how to navigate the viewer. I'll click through that. Looks like my computer is lagging a little bit. But it's pretty straightforward. Just click and drag to see different sides of the specimen. You can use your mouse wheel to zoom in or out. And maybe I'm really interested, I'll just pretend to be a trilobite researcher, and I'm like, oh, you know, the glabella, which is this kind of forehead wrinkle, is really important to me, and I want to measure it. I can click and click, and now I have a measurement of how big this trilobite forehead is that maybe I could use for morphometrics or any other study I might be interested in. So that is kind of the basic kind of setup. So all of the specimens that are on here are organized in the same way by some sort of major grouping. They all have their profile pages. And then you can look at the 3D viewer separately. So maybe, for instance, you're interested in something specific like a shell. You can use our search to look for shells, or maybe it's not shells, but it's the Devonian period. Same thing. So you can search in a variety of ways, which is really helpful when we're trying to send links to people. So that's kind of like the basic structure. And over the last couple of years, we've been working kind of hard to get a couple other more like friendly pieces on the website. So a couple years ago, I had a student helping me for their museum studies project to make this like backyard fossil finds website. So we get about 200 identification requests annually from members of the public, actually nationwide. I think because Museum of Paleontology like comes up quickly in Google searches. So we made a backyard fossil like identification guide for people to try and identify what fossil they found. And Michigan is largely Paleozoic invertebrates and some Pleistocene megafauna. So as the invertebrate specialist, I focused primarily on what I was able to produce quickly. And we tried to be as general as we could. So we worked with our communications manager at the time to help with like layperson language, more conversational versus scientific. So if you have an animal that kind of looks like a coral, you can click on this section. Use the images not dissimilar from Rebecca's identification portal, where you're kind of using visual guides to get you through the identification process. And you're like, oh, maybe it kind of looks like a horn coral. Then we have just a little bit of information about the horn coral, what features you might want to look for to identify it, and then links to other websites. And then you can also go to a specific 3D model, so you can look at it in 3 dimensions, or look at all of our 3D models for that specific group. So that's been really helpful and is actually our most visited page on the website, at least for the last year and a half or so. So people are finding it and using it, which is excellent. It hasn't decreased our emails, which was kind of my hope, but we can't win everything. But I can at least refer people to the website to start the identification process on their own. And then the other big project that we have had in the last couple years is the Life Through the Ages dioramas. So not too long ago, we transitioned from an older building to kind of 2 new buildings. So we are functionally separate from our Museum of Natural History, which had these really beautifully handmade dioramas, and some of them didn't make it into the new museum. So before the de-installation process occurred, students did photogrammetry on all of the models. And then how many summers ago was it? Maybe 3. We had a different museum studies student who was essentially, these dioramas always have like little numbers that correspond to a specimen that corresponds to the label that's next to them. So we tried to replicate that in a digital space. I'm not sure how well this will load, but I can give it a go. So I'm partial to the Devonian since that's kind of where I live. So this is a different type of viewer because the models are much larger, but it's similar in that you can still manipulate it. Let me see if I can, I'm probably gonna lower the point budget. So that essentially is just how big the model is, and my computer is slow, so I'm gonna make it less. So there'll be holes in the model. So if you have a nice computer or a good viewer, you can ramp it up all the way to 2 million so that you can see, or 100 million, I think, faces it has. So there's lots of different testings you can do in there as well. But each diorama has like a little summary. And then you can essentially, oh boy, okay, there we go. So the only reason it looks that pixelated is because of my resolution. So I can change it and it will increase in resolution pretty quickly. So maybe we're interested in this one. Oh, that's Favicites, how wonderful. common coral, honeycomb coral, for those of you that don't know. But now the viewer can look at this kind of reconstruction from an artist's perspective of what the coral might have looked like. And you could also click out to a 3D model of the actual fossil specimen. So you can get kind of the both views, what it might have looked like in life, and then how you might find it if you're out hunting for fossils. There are lots of other views in here that I won't go into too much, but it's really fun to kind of play around and essentially swim through the ancient oceans. We're working on getting a couple more dioramas up, and we'll continue to annotate them and upload them as we add more content to the website. So right now, I think it's largely, let's see, Cambrian, Ordovician, Devonian. We have a Permian land diorama as well, and a couple other dioramas that will eventually get added to this. So we've also had other collaborations, and then I'll kind of stop and anyone can ask questions or suggestions. The other project we had was with our local science Olympiad. Let me see, I can't remember. This is turning into a spelling test. So we have, as many institutions do, a locally run Science Olympiad program, and annually they send us like a list of specimens that they want to use during their exam. So we made a tag. So if people are studying for their Science Olympiad exams, they can come and look at specimens that might be on the tests. There was a period of time during the pandemic where we did everything virtually, but it was too quick to get all the models made. So we had been sending images. So we kind of had stuff picked out already. But then all we had to do is essentially collate it. So we can make this into a page for Science Olympiad. We could remove the names or hide the names so they could do the exam virtually. We've had other classrooms use our specimens in coursework, both online and in person. We've had different institutions and local schools reach out to us about 3D printing. We're kind of open to all of that as long as it fits within kind of the university policies of our terms of use. But there's a lot of really cool, I think, applications and potential for applications, but it's hard to, we don't have the time or resources to generate them, but we are always happy to assist community partners. And essentially that's why I come to this workshop. Well, I'm running it, but besides that, it's good to just get the word out, and then people know it exists so they can come and ask me questions or give us feedback on how to make it a little bit better. But yeah, so that's largely what I have. I won't take up any more time. If anybody has questions or comments, happy to take them.
Julie has her hand raised. Let me make everybody able to be unmuted again.
Okay, thanks, Molly.
All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now, Julie.
All right. Thank you very much. That is super cool. So I had a question for you on that measuring point to point thing on the 3D models, because I am having so much trouble like teaching with some digitized specimens and having students measure things. And I've been using ImageJ, which you have to calibrate, right? So what platform did you guys use, and how do you like norm the measurements even when you're zooming in and out so people can measure those?
Yeah, so that's part of our photogrammetry process. So all of the specimens are scaled to the actual specimen size. So we do that digitally before we upload them to the platform. So it depends on how, it's like a garbage in, garbage out type thing. If the data input isn't appropriate for what you're trying to do, that's when things start to fall apart, which is why everything we upload to our website is all scaled to actual size. So we either digitally or physically measure the specimen and then rescale the models. So all of the models are anatomically accurate.
Okay, thank you. And is
Mhm.
there a certain program that you guys use, or do you just have like amazing coding people on your staff?
Yeah, so my colleague Adam essentially built it from different pieces. So if you go onto UMorph, let me see if I can grab the link. There is a link about the viewer, like how the 3D interface was built. And I think there was he was going to put it on GitHub so other people could use it. Like he's not trying to keep it, but it's just not a high priority. So if there's a project that would want to modify it for use, that is something that we would be happy to work with people on.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, Jen. Thank you. This was a great presentation, and you're so lucky to have Adam.
I know.
I have a couple questions in that. Okay, I know you guys are really big into 3D, but is there any push to get your 2D, or is there not 2D digitization within your, or you're hoping to 3D everything? What about the specimens that only have data and not images? Are there any thoughts on moving that stuff into a online repository?
Yeah, so we are digitizing everything. So like earlier today, I was exporting essentially lists of all the file names that I have done already. And I'm at like 20,000 images of specimens and maybe 20,000 card catalog images as well. The problem we run into, which is probably like all the collection managers are probably gonna eye roll or sigh or just pass out. It's hard. How do you connect your collection management software in a way that's useful to your digital asset management software? So we have a relational database that can store images, but it's like not the best. It's like a low res thumbnail versus the high quality image. So then you're duplicating where the image is stored and archived. So we have a separate digital asset management system, but then we need to also transfer all of the files that I have to that with all the appropriate metadata. So it's just really slow, but kind of like our end goal is to have, we picked a digital asset management system that has a really nice API. So we're going to connect the collection management software and the digital asset management system into one kind of viewer. When that will happen, I don't know. If it will be publicly available, I don't know. I think it will depend on the type of data we're trying to share. But the idea is we would be able to give people temporary access at least. So if you're trying to search for something very specific, you can just use like a specimen number or genus name and it would search all of our records. So that is our ultimate goal. It's UMorph for now is largely for 3D fossils.
And you hit on exactly what my next question was, how it ties into the CMS and your dams. So given that that's onwards and in the future, I'll probably reach out to you and Adam separately. But another question, is your audience for this more educational than perhaps your researchers, or who do you anticipate the audience is for this?
So it's largely been up to now researcher based. So instead of loaning specimens, we'll send 3D models and they can just make a username and log in and download the model. We have something different for CT data just because the amount of data and the size of the data are so large. So that was like the first use case. And now we're kind of trying to expand more into the education side of things, but also maintain research projects. So something that I've been doing over the last year is trying to get other institutions to use it as a way to do like virtual collaborative projects. So I have a project with folks in Florida using models on the website that are downloadable to look at how the morphology of a brachiopod shell changes with epibionts and how that might impact the life mode of the animal. So we're essentially like using 3D geometric morphometrics on the 3D models, running different types of analyses. So using the platform as like a mechanism for collaborative research projects using the models. But it's hard, like we can't be everything at once. So that's kind of like my big push, at least recently, has been kind of in that direction. But I do share it every time I get a fossil identification request. I include a link to whatever animal group it might be that the person found.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Also a few questions in the chat for you.
Yeah, let's see. So some of the physical dioramas are on display in the new Museum of Natural History, which is at our Biological Sciences building. Some of the other ones got trashed. I was not here during the move, but Adam did rescue some from the dumpster, and we have like a random coral community out on our counter, because there was a limited amount of these made. I think Cornell also, or PRI has some as well, and maybe there's some at the National Museum of Natural History, but it's a sad story, but that's often what happens with when you're not in control and you don't own the stuff. Things get lost to time. Let's see. How much time did your team invest designing the digitization process? So that started well before my time here in the early 2000s, but we amend it as we go. So we usually have a team of 5 to 10 undergraduate technicians that work with us to help produce and edit and curate the models. And as with everything, things change through time, software, the ease of access for different things, computational power. So we just kind of update as needed. So currently we don't do a lot. And actually our light box where we do the photogrammetry is pretty low cost. We just use foam core board that we have like puzzled together with tablecloths to help diffuse the light, and then turntables from Amazon. We do have an automated way to do it as well. So usually you have to manually turn the turntable. We have like a little Arduino set up, and it will do it for us for each of our circles. So that saves a little bit of time as well. So I don't know, time invested is a difficult question to answer, because it's kind of like an ongoing, as we learn new things, we kind of shift, but we think about it a lot. So if anybody has questions or wants to talk about how to get set up, let us know. Or we work with the dental school and all sorts of other people to help others optimize as well and get new ideas.
I have a question.
Okey-doke.
Yeah, I was following along and I saw that there's a login area.
Mhm.
Is there like benefits for getting like an account?
Yeah, so the primary benefit is being able to download any model that is downloadable. So not all of them are downloadable by default, depending on ownership of the specimen, embargoes, that sort of thing. But if you're logged in and you're like, hey, this doesn't have a download button, you can shoot us an email. And if we are able to make it downloadable, we don't really have a problem with that. So yeah, log in, get your models.
Awesome. Do we have any further questions for Jen? We can always also take a quick 2-minute washroom, bio, stretch break, coffee break. We'll start again at 12 with yours truly. I'm gonna do a quick demo, just talking about a work in progress that we have called Hidden Figures in Natural History Collections. So hop back on in 2 minutes.